Kia ora, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Passing the Torch. Today, I'm very honored to be joined by Nicky Hager, so thank you very much, Nicky, for joining us today.
Pleased to be here with you.
So I'm just going to start off with the same question that I ask all of my interviewees, which is, could you just give me a brief introduction in your own words of who you are?
Yeah, well, I'm in my public life, which of course is what you mean. I am a I work as an author and investigative journalist, which was something that I'd never even imagined or heard of when I was growing up, when I was at university, but which just turned out to really answer the question for me after and after enough years had passed of how I could best make a difference in the world, and it served me very well.
Cool, yeah. Um, what was your family life like growing up? I mean, from what I read, your parents were people with quite colorful lives.
Yeah, so I've got my parents were in Levin. We grew up in Levin, which is a town that usually people laugh about. Funny little town north of Wellington. Um, but my parents were fish out of water, sort of fishes out of water there. My mother was an extremely active person. She was on the local council. She was all that house was just a whirlwind of projects, and so it was kind of predictable that her four offspring would would find themselves inevitably playing some kind of social role, public role in their lives. Whereas on the other hand, my father was a quiet man who had come out of who had escaped with his as a young person with his parents from Nazi Germany, Nazi Austria, in fact.
Mm.
And so we had this very positive mother and this kind of slight shadow or silence in the house of the sort of the horrible things, terrible things which had happened in my father's family. And I think in some, hard to explain way, those are both kind of influencing us since then.
Hmm. And what about your sisters? Could you tell me about them?
Oh, yeah, I'm so proud of my sisters. I've got three sisters. My youngest sister is a jeweler and had a jewelry shop in Wellington for years and teaches people jewelry. My next sister, Mandy, is many people have read her book. She's a very good writer. She's won every book award in New Zealand. Um, and my big sister teaches at Auckland University. She does a great job there. She teaches people involved in health the realities of politics in the world with the tobacco industry lobbyists and the alcohol industry lobbyists and kind of why it is that good things for health don't always happen because of the political pressures on them.
That sounds a bit similar to the sort of work that you're involved in.
It's yes, it's clearly quite similar to the kind of work I'm involved in.
Um, so you went to Victoria University studying physics and then philosophy. I mean, those are quite different subject areas. What drew you towards them?
I'm a kind of I'm a good example of how people who are going to university haven't the faintest idea what to take. And so I'd liked physics at school, and I enjoyed physics immensely. But even as I did it, I didn't think I was going to end up working in a lab or a factory or something. And same with philosophy. I'd essentially made up my mind early on that I was going to have a different kind of a life, not as predictable or sort of a straightforward career that came out of my degrees. So I was taking things which interested me, and at the same time, probably the most important part of my university life was getting involved in politics. And so I enjoyed the subjects I took, but they came second to discovering the world of politics and as I was saying earlier, trying to make a difference in the world.
Absolutely. So just on that, you stood for the Values Party in 1978, which was when you were still in uni, I believe. What
Yes.
what made you? I mean, you talked about your subjects coming second to your politics, but what made you think, yeah, I'll stand as a candidate here?
Um, do you know I don't even remember it very well, to be honest. I was 2 months. My birthday happened 2 months before the first election where I could vote. So I was just scraped into being a candidate, and it just seemed a good idea at the time. The main, and I loved it. I really enjoyed running around and putting up billboards and talking and things, as a obviously a very young person. But the main thing it did for me was it guaranteed that I would not be involved in party politics again for the rest of my life, because I liked it, but I realized there were more important things to do, and that was it.
Fair enough. Yep. Politics not for everybody. Um, Once you were finished university, you seem to depart off on a new path. Again, you worked for the government and then for your brother-in-law. Could you tell me about those experiences?
Sure. So this is kind of a continuation of my strange university subjects, which is that I was zigzagging my way without knowing quite where to put myself in the world, which I think is a very common experience, and one that you shouldn't worry about, because it's just how, you go to you go through school, you go to university, you don't even know all the options in the world. You don't really know what you care about most, and where you can most make a difference. And so you wouldn't want to get stuck in one career, sort of one degree, then one career. But in my case, I came out of university. While I was at university, I'd become passionate about um, forest conservation, native forest conservation. I was part of a group who we took trips into the forest. We held public meetings to stop areas being logged and burnt and so on. And so in fact, that had more influence on my post-university life than did my subjects that I'd studied. And I went and worked in a government science organization writing about native forests and logging of them and this ecological catastrophe that caused. And then when I finished that, I was I wanted something different. I wanted something I'd never done before. And so I took a job with my brother-in-law as a builder. And for several years, I I was fixing houses and building bits on houses around Wellington. But and that was my day every day, 8 or 9 till 5.
Mm.
But at the same time, again, my real life was carrying along with it, and I was getting more and more involved in political things, and eventually starting work on my first book, which was subsidized by my work as the builder for the Wellington City Art Gallery at the time. So I was, as I say, I was zigzagging. I was finding a way to earn money, but I was also trying to find the best role for myself, and playing something, doing something useful in the world.
Mm. Yeah, very very common experience. So is
Yeah.
that what made you want to uh, pursue investigative journalism in terms of like you wanting to make a positive change?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, um, first time I've been many times now to international investigative journalism conferences and meetings where we, me and my sort of worldwide colleagues are getting together and doing things. And at first I thought they would be kind of hard ass, tough people wanting to find the best story, but actually they're almost all exactly the same as I was, which was trying to figure out how to do something about the rainforest logging in their African country, or the social problems in their country, or trying to do something about war. And
Hmm.
so I think it's a very common phenomenon that investigative journalists are people who are motivated to trying to do some good. Um, so I was carried along in that.
Yeah, that's really cool. Um, I won't go over all of your books because you have so many and they're all very good. But for listeners who haven't read your first book, Secret Power, could you summarize what that was about for us?
Yeah. So this was the book I wrote. This is a book I started to research when um, I never imagined I would be an investigative journalist, and I didn't even imagine I'd be writing a book. I was working as a builder. I was interested in political issues, and some people, and I was interested in the Sama movement in Wellington, and some people I know were involved in uncovering this secret intelligence base in Manawatu near Palmerston North. And so I was totally intrigued, and we went up one weekend to have a look at it. And I played it sort of junior keen researcher, and scurried around and drew the aerials which were hidden in the sandhills there, and took down the number plates of the cars in the car park without any mission or actually any very practical thing, and it could have then easily gone nowhere. But I was intrigued by the place, And so later I managed to track down who the owners of the cars were in the car park. And then later again, I managed to find them hidden in some lists which I had then conveniently leaked of everyone who worked in the defence headquarters in Wellington. And there they were. There was this whole category of people hidden in there who were called defence people and all different different job types and things, but they were actually working for our secret intelligence agents, our secret biggest spy agency, with disguised as defence people. And so in that way, I was just as a kind of interesting aside, when I got home from work from building someone's new car deck or something, I've managed to put together a full list of everyone who worked in our most secret intelligence agency, what their job advertisements had been when they took the job, what their positions were called, what their ranks were. And eventually I knew enough about it and enough of their history just from this lucky research that I started interviewing people and would eventually write this book, this really detailed book. It took me years because I didn't know what I was doing. I learned on the job. But this very detailed book about how New Zealand played this completely unknown role in spying on Japan and spying on all these different countries, spying on all our South Pacific neighbours, which we still do on behalf of the American alliance. And eventually was able to publish it. And by publishing that, without really understanding what I was doing, was kind of like the place where I changed my life into a completely different track and doing investigative journalism, for 30 years since.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, what was writing that book like for you? I mean, you talk about sort of doing it on and off and on the side, but and learning on the job, as you say. But what was that experience like?
Well, I think, given that I've written many books now and I'm confident and I lecture overseas about how to write books, it's probably really good to point out I did not know what I was doing. And I'm just saying this as an incentive or encouragement to other people, and I didn't take a, non-fiction writing course at university or anything. I just started doing it, which is a perfectly good way to do it. But you just have to, I use my motivation rather than my knowledge to carry me through the process. For example, when I thought I'd finished it, when I'd been working on it for a few years, I travelled to Britain to talk to the main intelligence expert of that kind of intelligence, to show him what I'd found and to check stuff. And I thought I was showing him a final document. In fact, it was totally unreadable. It was boring. It was full of facts, but kind of most like eating dust. And so then I came back and I had to go through a new stage of teaching myself how to make a book worth reading, how to make it interesting to turn the pages and to make people want to go to the next chapter and things. So exactly, I learned on the job.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a great way to do it. When it released, it sort of went through a bit of a wave in the populace, and that there was a bit of fanfare about it, and then it sort of died down. A bit of fanfare, it died down, and then Europe picked up on it, and then it really took off. Could you tell me about that?
Well, this was a profoundly New Zealand experience. Like authors talk to each other about the difficulty of getting published and then the difficulty of getting anyone to take you seriously when you're not a known person. So I was not a known person. I'd written this book, and I managed to get about half a day's worth of publicity for it. And then it totally, utterly died, as things do. And it was kind of a bit weird and new that somebody's claiming in minute detail, which probably hadn't been read by hardly any people, about the secret spying that was going on and how it was part of a US system of countries doing this kind of secret spying and the details. So no great surprise that the news machine didn't quite know what to do with it, and so sniffed at it and then left it. And then I thought, oh, is that how it works? You kind of not get very much publicity for these things. And I thought just before I go back to building and think what I'm going to do with the next stage of my life, I will at least write one good article and get it in an overseas publication, because it would be a waste otherwise, because I know stuff about their intelligence systems, worldwide systems, that they don't know. So I wrote an article for something called Covert Action Quarterly in the United States, which came and went without any fanfare either. And then I forgot about it more or less. And then completely out of my control, a researcher at the European Parliament who was working on privacy and surveillance came across the article I'd written, the US article I'd written, and from one day to and put it into a report there. And from one day to the next, and about 2 years after the book was published, my phone started ringing, and I spent much of that year having film crews come from other countries and interviews, and then this special select committee of the European Parliament set up just to study the intelligence system I talked about and its impact on Europe. I went to the European Parliament and was their witness there and helped them write their reports and stuff. So what had started as a kind of a, oh yeah, another little thing in New Zealand, forget about it, ended up being the most effect I will ever have overseas for anything I ever write. And as it's kind of really obvious, that kind of impact and success is a huge motivator to think I'll do that again and I'll keep going.
Yeah. And it sounds like a very surreal experience.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't what I was expecting, and I just kind of just paddled through the middle of it, you know.
Yeah. Um, your next two books then were sort of looking back are sort of the odd ones out because they're both environmentally focused and your other ones are sort of military and politics. Did
Yeah.
they feel different to write or did you approach them differently?
Well, no, not really, because you have to remember, I didn't call myself a writer then. I would have thought that was incredibly presumptuous when I just managed to put together one book. And you know, you're at the beginning of your process and of your career, and you don't know where you're going. So why did I write about those environmental things? Same reasons I'd worked in the scientific organization on forests. I cared about forests and the environment. The issues mattered to me. And as I said, that's the same thing I've found when I've gone overseas, that my colleagues in different countries, the reason they do all that bloody work on hard subjects and to uncover things is because they care about them.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, do you, looking back at those books now, um, do you view them a bit differently in terms of we've got the climate crisis going on and people are paying more attention to environmental issues?
Um, yeah, the main thing I'd say about them is that they were current at the time. The first of them, which was about native forest logging on the west coast and this very dirty PR campaign to stop the environmentalists, which is very topical today, that helped. That book on its own helped to stop the logging down there because it was so embarrassing to the loggers to be caught out. But the main thing I'd say about them, because we're talking to people now and not then, is that those issues haven't changed. There are still PR companies like the one that I'd been leaked the details from for that second book, who specialize in trying to stop the public winning on issues. And I would urge anyone who cares about these things to go and find those books, go and find them and read them, because although they're from a slightly less digital age and it's slightly different issues, it's all the same stuff, and you don't get the inside leaks on this very often, and people need to know what they're up against.
Mm, absolutely. Yeah, still very relevant today, as you say.
Yeah.
Um, I want to jump ahead to dirty politics, which, I mean, I was quite young at the time, and even I remember it was on the news just constantly. It was very complicated web that was uncovered, but could you begin to summarize it?
I would love to summarize it actually, and because when you're involved in a controversy like that, most people are registering the controversy more than the detail.
Hmm.
And maybe you don't even kind of understand what it's about. So what it was about is that there was a real nastiness that emerged in New Zealand politics quite quickly, carried in on the back of social media, which had arrived in a big way. And social media were providing this environment where people could launch nasty smear attacks on other people and other people's sex lives and other people's secrets, um, and also just smears that weren't even true, but there's no chief reporter or editor or something at the newspaper who's standing in between the person writing it and the public. So there was this great new environment that helped, that facilitated a nasty kind of attack politics. And I thought, this really needs some work. This is a bad thing. I can see it's a bad thing, but I need to find some information. And I found some information, some incredible information, and eventually had the documents showing that this son of a former head of the National Party was running this blog site called Whale Oil. And he wasn't thinking up things to write on his blog. He had someone a secret person in the Prime Minister's office, John Key's office, sending him through smears of all their opponents to put up, a few times a week. And he had paying customers, like he had the tobacco industry and the alcohol industry paying a PR person to write smears on public health doctors and put them up there. And he even had candidates for like National Party people who were competing with other National Party people for electorates in the elections would pay these secret smearers to smear the other National Party people so they could win seats and things. So like there was this great industrial scale smearing operation for money going on, kind of all buried within the middle of the National Party, which was incredibly embarrassing for John Key because it was being run, the political part, from an office 2 doors from his office on the ninth floor of the Beehive. So rather than admit it, he just had to be furiously wild at me and refused to answer questions for week after week as the election campaign went through in 2014, like 9 years ago. And it was a very exciting and controversial time.
Yeah, absolutely. And that book was kept under wraps right up until publication to avoid like a court injunction or something similar. What did it feel like for you to be? I mean, I know you never reveal ahead of time what you're writing about, but that was especially under a sort of veil of urgency and secrecy. How did that feel to work under?
Um, Actually, the honest answer is it had become a regular method. Right from that first book on spies, if they'd known it was coming, they would have freaked out, and it would have been very hard to ever get it published because of the legal blocks. And then I had an earlier book on the National Party called The Hollow Men, which I strongly recommend to any person interested in parliamentary politics. But that book, I had an injunction on it, in this great big fight to get it, even to be able to the public to be able to see it. And so I had learned that waiting for people with a lot more money and endless lawyers and trouble to cause to decide that they would let me publish a book was just too hard. So we prepared it in secret. And actually, I was so intent. I got leaked the information on the beginning of the election year, and I thought this has to come out before the election. But I was so busy just trying to write good prose and check my facts and figure out what the cover would be and do all that work that I didn't really realize that I didn't have enough sort of extra mental space to realize that I had a massive controversy on my hands, which would explode when it came out. I was just getting the book out.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. And I mean, you talk about it. I mean, it really did take the country by storm. For you, what did that feel like being in the middle of that?
Sometimes I remember it, and it's kind of like a dream. I'll just give a little taste of it. I went on a book tour for weeks, and the reaction I got, I'm certain that I was getting bigger audiences than most or every politician. I can picture in my mind this great big picture theatre in Nelson where it was totally full to the brim. There was just a huge audience. Or when I was at Waikato University, and they had a great big lecture theatre, and then the lecture theatre next door to it, and both were completely full and having to answer questions between the two rooms. And it was I will never have that experience again. There was just this great sense of amazement and sort of energy about the whole thing. And so, like, it's for me, who works quietly on my own with papers and files and books and quiet meetings in town with people and things. It's like totally different life, but you have to stick up for your work. You have to tell people what you're doing. so I just did it, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, there were some actions that the police took against you after that book, and I mean, it wasn't the first time. The SIS had some involvement with you over other people's wars. Could you tell us
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah, the SIS, I caught them later. This was just luck. I actually caught them, which you don't normally do, and but I did. And for a book, Other People's Wars on the War in Afghanistan, a big book, um, and they eventually had to pay me money because they had been monitoring my phone to try out find out my sources. But the much more controversial, or kind of actually the much more upsetting one that happened was that John Key and Judith Collins, um, who were friends of this blogger who had this dirty politics process going on, were just like deeply so angry at me for getting the book and for doing it. And the Monday after the election, where they'd got back in power, this direction went through the upper levels of the police, basically saying to get me.
Hmm.
I don't know if it was directly from the ministers or even if it was from the ministers, but it sure felt like it. Um, and then the police from South Auckland worked up this plan and raided our house here and early in the morning. Unfortunately, I was away, so my daughter was here by herself and woken up by these police. They spent 11 hours going through the house, turning it over, trying to taking every electronic thing from the house, like even the ridiculous ones like, 10-year-old CDs and things. Um, and and then there was this great big court case where my lawyers sued the police for unlawfully coming to the house and made sure that all my gear got stored locked in the High Court building in Auckland, so they couldn't look at anything. Not that I would ever write down the source anyway. Um, and we won. And the police had to give me, this is my alternative way of saving up for my retirement, kind of, is when people have to pay me money for doing the wrong things. But I got a payout from the police. They never saw my material, and and I hope that there'll be a kind of a long time to come, a group memory in the police that you don't do that kind of thing, that it's just not on, and it'll just blow up in your face like it did for them.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very aggressive way of treating you in that they insisted that you were a witness, not under investigation.
That's right. That's right. It's actually unheard of that a witness, as opposed to someone who's committed a crime, would be raided like that and have all their material taken away. Nothing about it was normal. There was the issue was incredibly political, but the reaction was incredibly political. And one day in the perfect world, the true story will come out, but it will be hard.
Do you think them taking actions like that against you was meant as a sort of warning shot on their behalf to you and to other, journalists who might publish these sorts of things, that this is the punishment?
Possibly, or it was just an impulse to punish and kind of get back at me. I'm not sure, because I genuinely don't know whether particular government ministers were involved or quite how it worked. So I'm not sure.
Mm. Um, Looking at all of your work, would you say it's fair that in all of those situations, the government publicly has played on the notion that New Zealand sort of has about itself, that we're very small and we don't get involved in anything, we're very just down the bottom of the world, to sort of hide what it's actually doing?
Yeah, partly. I mean, the first thing I'd want to say is we live in one of the least corrupt, most democratic countries on earth, and we shouldn't be. We should realize that. We shouldn't think that this is a terrible place and it's a police state or anything like that, even when there's problems, because you just have to look at elsewhere in the world and you'd find that we're the lucky ones. But we shouldn't be the complacent ones, is the point, and that's why this work is important, because um, we do have corruption. We have corruption. We have a local government where um, people win contracts, or the road goes past out to the new subdivision which somebody owns, and then their land doubles in price, and there's buddies and friends, and winks and things like that. Um, and in politics, we're slack. Um, Due process isn't followed. Things are kept secret, which are embarrassing, which really shouldn't be kept secret. And so, while I don't think we're a deeply corrupt country or anything like that, we have to be vigilant. And if we're not vigilant, we're like a town without a police force,
Mm-hmm.
because people think they can get away with stuff or learn that they can get away with stuff. And so, while I don't think we're a terrible country, when in fact I feel relieved of many things about the country, um, we need transparency and we need to catch people out, or else we're going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, you, I mean, not necessarily. Well, you do write about politics, but you've gotten dragged into it a bit more than you write about it. Do you think politics, that environment and that space have gotten worse over your lifetime, or become more divided, maybe?
Uh, Actually, things think that the current time always seems the worst, but no, I'd say it probably hasn't got worse. It's got more frenetic. Um, what I would say is, I've already said this a little bit, the era of social media and of so much commentary going on, not through any kind of filter of ethics or, you know, media ethical codes and stuff like that, but just anyone being able to put any old shit out about someone else and things, and probably get away with it, has meant that politics is more combative. It is less reasonable.
Mm,
Um, the wrong people get the most space sometimes. And I think that's a genuine problem, because politics is kind of voluntary. You know, people don't have to be involved. People don't have to serve their country and try to do the right thing and try to have the best policies and try to solve climate change, whatever it is. They don't have to do that. And if it's just a nasty um, war zone, then the decent people decide to go off and do something else with their lives. So it really matters. It really matters in a big way. And like all new technologies which change the environment we live in, it takes a while to catch up with them, and we really do need to catch up with the world, the post media monopoly world, where we're a media with, you know, all its imperfections, but at least still some standards, was standing between the public and news. Um, we'll get there. We'll get there, but it's a big problem at the moment to have such a deregulated zone for truth and fact.
yeah. Well, I mean, like you were saying, we've got to be vigilant on that. Um, how do you decide what to write about? Obviously, you get information sometimes leaked or fed to you, but have you ever gotten like some information and thought, maybe I don't think I want to pursue this particular line?
Yes, yes. In fact, I probably about twice a month on average, sometimes much more. I have people who are offering me information and giving me stories, which I have to say no to. Basically, partly because they're probably things which um, are not worth it,
Mm.
but mainly because I'm working on my own, or at most with another colleague sometimes, and there just isn't time to do everything in the world which people would like me to do. And so, what do? I try to think of the issues which are kind of big systemic issues, or just big issues which aren't getting the attention they deserve, or which seem to be being misunderstood, and to work on those big issues and say no to all the rest, because you've only got so many issues that you can do in your life.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. Um, so I mean, I know you never answer this question, but I have to ask it anyways. What's next for you?
Since you asked so politely, I guess I can tell you. No, I never say what I'm going to do next. Um, the most obvious reason is that if I say I've got a leak about dirty bloggers who are being paid to smear people or something, I can't tell people. I just can't tell people what I've got coming. It just would never ever work. But there's a more personal reason, actually, which is that early in my career, which would have been book 2 or 3, I thought I'd do a book about sort of economics in New Zealand, and social and economic policy, which is very important. And I really try to do it, and I talk to lots of people about it, and I still have people who enjoy teasing me about when my economics book is coming. In other words, I know, I think probably other writers feel the same. It's quite a good thing not to advertise things when you haven't actually proven that you can do them yet.
Is it difficult for you to not be able to share what you're doing?
Um, no, no, not at all, actually. Writing, research and writing are interesting. With my research, I'm constantly asking people things and getting help from people and meeting people. But basically, I'm on my own.
Mm.
I have to do it. I have to figure it out. I have to strategize it. I have to work out the pros and cons for whether something is correct and the pros and cons of whether I can use some information without getting someone in trouble because they might be identifiable by the information. It's a very, it suits somebody who likes to work on their own. And then writing, you can't work with a committee when you're writing. You just have to do it by yourself. So it's not for everyone, but I'm actually working on my own is the best thing for keeping a project quiet, but it's also the best way to do it. It's just and that's an enjoyable, quiet, productive life.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, this year, 2023, you received an order of merit for your work from the government. How did that feel for you? I imagine it must. I mean, the Crown is the one awarding this, and I mean they've been sort of your natural enemy for such a long time, and now they're changing tack.
Uh, but I know that inside an intelligence agency there are good people and bad people
Mm.
and just going to work people. And I know inside governments there are rogues, and then on all parties there are ones who are reasonable. Um, and so it doesn't surprise me that happened. Like just because I think that's just normal that could happen. Um, but it totally surprised me. You don't apply for these things yourself. Somebody goes to an awful lot of work and they keep secret who it was to do the applications for it. And then so it arrives in my email one day saying I've been offered to have these letters after my name, which I have no personal need for. And and I was puzzled for a while, but what I thought was it had these really magical words for me, which was for services to investigative journalism. And I thought, this is worth it. This isn't going to happen all the time. And so I haven't been, um, you know, smart about it or mealy mouthed about it. I've just said, thank you. Great. This is really good. I'm glad our profession's being recognized. And that's how I feel. I think it's okay. And then next time I have something which some people in the establishment will find totally offensive that I'm doing, I don't care. Maybe it will give me some defense some protection when I do that.
Absolutely, yeah. Um, you've been in the game of investigative journalism for quite a while now. Has it changed much? Do you think? Do you see like the younger ones coming through, maybe doing things differently or using different ways of doing things like that?
Uh, Actually, yes, I spoke at a great big, I was a keynote speaker at a great big European investigative journalism conference earlier this year. And I was saying what I wanted to say. And there were some things like um, there's kind of a tradition, an idea around at the moment that the work of investigative journalism is receiving massive, great big piles of leaked data, like, hard drives full from secret whistleblowers, and that's kind of what investigative journalism means. And I was said at this conference, no, 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 no. This is taking us in the wrong direction, because although there are some subjects which I would love to have that hard drive of information on, all the rest of the subjects in the world, I don't want that hard drive. It's not what most needs to be done. And that I think, so I think some people have lost their way a bit, and that the process of investigative journalism should be, what do I care about most? What what's the most useful thing I can be doing, and have I got the opportunity if I work hard to do something about it? And that self-directed studying the thing which is most important to us is really, to me, the heart of what the profession is. And just having someone turn up and say, here's some terabytes of scandal or private information or something, that's not the job. That's a kind of a false road, I think. But more generally, how's it changed for young people? Keep in mind, I didn't study to be an investigative journalist. I don't think most people would. And I think it's probably exactly today. It's exactly the same as it was for me, which is that there are some people who care about what the impact of the dairy industry, or who care about the tragedy of housing or something, and who think someone should write about this. And that's basically that's our job application to the world. Is just saying somebody should do this, and then getting on and trying to do it.
So some things change, some things stay the same.
Some things change, some things stay the same.
What do you think? There's been a lot of talk internationally about whistleblowers and protection laws around them. What do you think about the laws around that here?
I've got very clear views on that. We've got a whistleblower act here, which I have been involved with once, and it was all secret, so I can't tell you what the story was, and it was successful. But most of the time, like maybe I've had somewhere between 100 and 200 or more secret sources, and then very secret sources in the dozens who've helped me. I've had riches compared to most people. But in almost every case, I have been really clear that them speaking up as a whistleblower would wreck their lives, that the public good they were trying to do by helping me would be outweighed by them losing their job, by the old boys network punishing them and not letting them continue their careers and so on. And so I'm while I think there's a small place for whistleblowing laws, I don't recommend whistleblowing. I recommend leaking. I recommend secret leaking, and then a person in my position being studiously careful to protect them and to publish it in the way which protects them, and then to keep them secret for the rest of my life in the way that protects them, so that someone can do that good work and act in the public interest and do something really useful, but not pay a horrible disproportionate price for it.
Do you think we should have dispensation for protecting whistleblowers, though?
Oh yes, I think we should, and I think it could be better. And the kind of place where it's probably more needed is that you're working in a health organization and they've told everyone to shut up about something, or they're working in the defense force and they've told everyone to shut up about the civilian casualties or something, and somebody wants to speak up about it. And the more protection there is that allows some people to do that, the more likely it is that people will do the right thing. And so yes, we do need that. We really need that people feel some safety.
Yeah, absolutely. Is we've kind of talked about this already, but is investigative journalism a pathway that you'd recommend to younger people? And is there anything that you'd say they need to know before they jump in?
Of course I would. I mean, and it's not for everybody. Research is not everybody's thing, but some people just love research, or they try it out and they love it. And writing, as I was trying to explain earlier, it doesn't come naturally to most of us. You have to work at it. And what the main thing I would say is, anyone who imagined that they would go to school, take a 3-year course in investigative journalism and be an investigative journalist for their life is probably having a different imagining than is what actually happens to most investigative journalists. That it's the kind of job that that you work your way towards, and then you've taken opportunity, or you've established yourself and you can earn your living in one part of your life, like I did with building, earn your living in one way and then get on with it without having to have somebody funding you, which is not very realistic in the media for your first projects and taking years to produce one story, kind of. So I think it's much the same, that for somebody wanting to start it, have realistic expectations about how you won't find a well-paid job which offers you to do this, but that if you're that kind of person, to keep it in your mind, to realize that when there's that issue that you think, as I said before, somebody should be doing, that you decide, I will be the person to do that. And then you find me, ask my advice, ask someone else some advice, give it a try, stick at it. And nothing has changed in this. It can be an incredibly satisfying and incredibly rewarding and worthwhile thing to do.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Sort of on that note, in terms of rewarding, do you have a career high?
Ah, the honest answer is, and it will sound like a boast, I've had so many good stories and important findings come my way, and I don't know why. I'm not really sure why. I've had an unusually large number come my way. Um, but the thing that I'm most proud of, which I think everyone will understand, is that like when you're, I don't know if it's happened to others, but when you're at university or when you're a young person who's trying out politics, people say, "Oh, when are you going to sell out? When you'll get that job and you'll just settle down into a normal life and your idealism will disappear." Um, Nearly everyone I know who I work with in investigative journalism and in other ways, that hasn't happened to them. But that's the thing I measure myself by. I respect people who keep going, and I feel pleased with myself that I haven't settled into some comfortable other role, but that I keep trying, that I keep going, and that keeping going is the thing which I'm most pleased with myself about.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any big regrets or anything you wish you maybe pushed harder on, say?
Ah, um, we don't have time for them all. um, I've made mistakes. I've bungled my contacts with people, or my relations with people. I haven't. Um, Luckily, I've never got anyone in trouble. But you know, or everything we do, we have to think hard about it, to look after the relationships and to treat people decently and to, you know, be imaginative enough. And then all those things we fail and realize later what we could have done better sometimes. That's just human. The main thing is to keep trying.
Hmm. Yeah. What do your what do your family think about? Not think about the work you do, but do they feel affected by it, or do they maybe get little snippets while you're writing?
um, my family do know what I'm working on, even when it's secret to the rest of the world. My sisters and my daughter and my partner and things. Um, I, not everyone has this, and I feel grateful for it. My family are my total continuous supporters, and that's a really good way to live.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, Obviously you haven't stopped writing, but overall, so far, would you say that you're happy with the work you've done? Do you think you did all you could to, you know, push what needed pushing or change what needed changing?
Yes and no. I'm happy with the work I've done, but because I'm dealing in the trying to change the world and trying to reveal things and trying to um, right the wrongs kind of career, um, I I know all the things where I haven't managed to do it yet, and where I wish I'd been able to do more, or hope I can do more one day.
Mm.
So I don't feel like I've cracked it all. I think there are big important things which vex me and which deserve hard work, and where I'd love to have the right sources and which provided me with a vehicle to talk about the rights and wrongs of new areas and things. But I haven't managed it all yet, of course.
Yeah, fair enough. Um, I can imagine at times the forces that you were coming up or going up against were really they're very big people and could seem almost untoppable. Did you ever deal with burnout or maybe like struggling to keep on going with the project?
Of course, anyone who says that they've never had burnout is hasn't lived. um, what causes burnout? Burnout is when you work harder than your motivation. Um, that your motivation doesn't last out because you had to work so hard and so long on something. And sometimes burnout comes from difficult relationships, because having friendly, kind of constructive relationships is really just so vital to being able to function properly. So um, we're all at risk of things being difficult and of having mental health troubles and the rest of it. That's part of the human condition. And having said that, um, I think one of the reasons why I've continued to do a lot of big and controversial things is because I know I've learnt that I can do them. That
Mm.
what seemed like you just shrivel up and hide for the rest of your life, I've gone through those, and then I've done the next one, and then I've done the next one. And people who were saying I was wrong and I was ridiculous or whatever and calling me names later are just accepting that what I did was true. And this is a really good lesson, especially for a young person, that you can think that you've kind of been wiped out, or that you've been, discredited. But the best way to deal with that is just to keep going. And there is a human dynamic of persistence paying off, and getting it, people believing you.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Zooming out a bit and speaking more generally, there's a myriad of really pressing issues that are facing the whole world and are facing future generations, especially. I mean, climate change, housing crisis. There's too many to list. But what do you think is our biggest threat going forward?
Can I give more than one answer?
Absolutely.
um, I think that our political system is constantly under pressure. I think that the ability to buy elections and to buy parties and for wealthy influencers to influence what happens in politics is a huge issue, and it doesn't go away, and it will never go away. And if we don't keep fighting it, then it wins. Like, it just has to be we just have to stick at that one, or else we don't live in a democratic country. It's as simple as that. Number one. Number two, I think that the main terrible social issue in New Zealand, by miles, which is not being addressed properly, is housing, as you said. It's a crime. It is a massive intergenerational crime, and as I say, there just isn't enough attention. There isn't enough good analysis. It's treated like a lot of it's treated like it's a bad weather pattern or something. It's not. It's a result of politics and personal interest and political manipulation, and then dreadful transfers of wealth from the poor to the rich. It's very important. So that would be near the top of the list of things I think need doing. And then the environment, which is not just like a cutesy subject. It's like big, hard, real subjects which need our work. And with those three, we don't have to look very much further to be busy for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. Um, you've you've spoken a lot of truth to power, and I'm sure that there's a lot of younger generations that do look up to you. Do you, we've just talked about the issues that face us. Do you have faith in the younger generations coming through to tackle those issues?
I'll tell you what I don't like. I really hate it when someone who's older like me says, "Oh, I'm really glad there's these young people that they'll look after it. The world's in safe hands because those young people will look after it." And I think, no, that's not fair. Everyone's got to do it. We've all got to do it till the day we die. So, but yeah, I think journalists, there are better journalists today than on average than there have ever been. Political people, there have been more informed and ethical and determined political people than ever before, and so on. We are human-wise, not problems-wise, but human-wise. There's great people around. But they've just got hard jobs, and they need to stick together, and they need to look after themselves, and then and not give up and despair, because as I said, we've got such big problems.
Yeah, big jobs ahead. You sort of just said your message there, but if you met a young person who was wanting to change the world, what would be your advice to them?
Um, I think I've kind of hinted at this a bit. I've sort of said it before. All of us are trying to answer the same question. I think I don't feel very far from the 17-year-old me who was getting involved in politics. We're trying to find a best way to have our most possible effect on the world. And what I would say is, that's a good question. And the answer to the question will change with time as we learn more and we understand ourselves more and we understand the world, like the political environment we're in. But that's the question we should be answering. And it's not just kind of I did a bit of politics when I was at university, but now I'm having my real life. If it's worth looking after the world when we're young and idealistic, it's worth looking after the world for our whole lives. And so our ambition should be, our personal mission should be to find the best way we possibly can and to make sure we can keep doing it, and then find the better way and then find another way and just keep going. And if we do that, then we really have made a big difference.
Carpe, absolutely. Well, that's all the questions I have for you. But ngā mihi everyone for listening, and thank you very much, Nikki, for taking the time out to join us today.
Certainly, of course. I wish everyone well. Yeah.
But yes, ngā mihi everyone. Thanks for listening, and I hope to see you again on another episode. Kia ora.